Hi Year 4, hope you're all doing okay and welcome to your IPC lesson on the Book of the Dead. So your learning intention today is to understand how the Book of the Dead was used in ancient Egypt. So what actually is the Book of the Dead? So the Book of the Dead is a collection of spells and illustrations, which is drawings, which were written on papyrus. And we know what papyrus is because we looked at that when we did hieroglyphics, and you actually, some of you made papyrus as well. And the papyrus was rolled and into like a scroll, and it was put inside a hollow statue and placed in the tomb with all the other things that the dead person would need for the afterlife. So after the body was mummified, which is what you learned about last week, when they were put in the coffin and then into the tomb with all their treasures, which we also learned about, and they were also the Book of the Dead was also put in, which was put inside a hollow statue. And there's actually an example here. It's a wooden figure of Osiris. So sometimes they would put them into Osiris, and yeah, they would normally be put into something to kind of preserve them, to keep them safe, because it was a very important document. So why have the Book of the Dead in your tomb? What was the point of it? So the idea of it was to give the dead person the knowledge and the power to travel through the netherworld and enter the afterlife. So the netherworld was kind of the world between the living and the afterlife. So it was after you've died, and it was the journey you took in order to get to the afterlife. So the afterlife was the destination where the dead people wanted to be. But to get there, you had to travel through the netherworld, and that's where you need the Book of the Dead to help you travel through it. What did the Book of the Dead tell you about? So it told you how the dead person could travel through the netherworld, and what they might meet on the journey. So they might meet the gods, hostile creatures. So that means creatures that you probably wouldn't want to meet. So they might be quite dangerous. And they would also meet the final judgment to decide if they could enter the afterlife, which is where they would weigh the person's heart, which is why they kept the heart in the body. What was the netherworld like? So the netherworld was the part, remember, where the person was traveling between the dead and the afterlife. So it was a landscape with paths, rivers, mountains, caves, lakes, and fields. And they had to pass through many gates and doors guarded by gods. So the Book of the Dead helped them to travel through this landscape and to travel through the gates and past the gods to get to the afterlife. So it was kind of like a quest, I guess, and the Book of the Dead helped them get through it. What special powers did the spells give you? So the spells in the Book of the Dead gave the dead person the power to control their body and keep it safe. They also allowed them to turn into different animals, provided information which they would need to repeat at certain points on the journey, and offer protection against hostile creatures. So the spells which were written in hieroglyphs in the Book of the Dead, they were used to help protect the dead person on the journey through to get to the afterlife, in order to make sure they got there safely and to know what to say and to provide them with information that they might need to speak to the gods to help them on their journey, basically. So it was kind of like a script to help them get from the netherworld to the afterlife. So how did you get into the afterlife? So once you travel through the netherworld, the gods judged how the dead person had led their life when they were alive to decide if they deserved eternal life in the afterlife. The dead person's heart was weighed against the feather of truth. So that's where they kept the heart in the body when they were mummified. So then in the scales, they would have a feather on one side and a heart in the other. If shown to be free from evil, they were declared true of voice and admitted to the afterlife. So if they were proved to be a good person and they lived a good life, they were let into the afterlife. If not, their heart was eaten by the devourer and they would cease to exist forever. So they wouldn't get to the afterlife. So after all that going through the netherworld, they wouldn't make it to the afterlife. And that was essentially the goal. So if they didn't make it there, then that was really bad to them. What was the afterlife like? So there were several possible afterlives. The dead person might travel with the sun god Ra in his boat sailing through the sky each day. and the Netherworld each night, or they might go to the field of reeds, a landscape like Egypt with rivers to sail on and fields of crops to ensure the dead never went hungry. So there's lots of different possible places they could have gone to when they got to the afterlife. So there's lots of different types of afterlives which they might have gone to. So the Papyrus of Annie is about a person called Annie, who was a scribe, and they lived in ancient Egypt over 3,000 years ago. In 1888, so that was about 150 years ago, some Egyptian traders found a scroll belonging to the ancient scribes, belonging to Annie, which turned out to be the copy of the Book of the Dead. So they found this person, Annie's Book of the Dead, and they actually were able to translate it, there we go, to translate it from the hieroglyphs into English. They could understand all the sections about the prayers, the speeches, and the hymns that were used to help him pass through the underworld or the netherworld into the afterlife. So we're going to find out what was actually in his journey to the afterlife. So this is what has been translated from his actual Book of the Dead, so the scroll, the papyrus with all the writing on it in hieroglyphs. It's been translated, so we can know now what he actually had to go through to get to the afterlife. So it says, first, his body was mummified. So that's just a process of mummification. All his organs were removed for his heart, and then the body is embalmed and wrapped in linen strips and charms. A scarab amulet is added over his heart. The process takes 2 months. So we learned about that last week, about the mummification process. So that's the first step to the afterlife. The second step says, in Annie's tomb were placed many different things that he will need for the afterlife, including Shakti dolls, models of servants and assistants who will help him on the journey and in the afterlife. The more objects the tomb contains, the easier the journey and the better the afterlife will be. Oh, sorry. And then 3, it says, Annie's spirit must pass through the Duat, which is the underworld, a realm with lakes of fire and magical gates guarded by fierce creatures. Apep, the serpent god of destruction, lurks here, waiting to swallow Annie's soul. So he's got to make it through the underworld without getting hurt or swallowed by it, or his soul swallowed by the Apep, the serpent god. Number 4, he uses the Book of the Dead filled with prayers and spells to pass through the underworld until he reaches the Hall of Mayat, which is the goddess of truth and justice. When he gets there, he is judged by 42 assessor gods. He steps up to each one and tells them a sin that he has not committed. For example, making anyone cry or eavesdropping. Eavesdropping is where you listen into someone's conversation when you shouldn't really be doing it. Annie's heart scarab amulet stops his heart from giving away his secrets. Number 6, Annie's heart is weighed against a feather. If he has lived an honest life, his heart will be lighter than the feather. If his heart is too heavy, it will be devoured by Amit, part crocodile, part leopard, part hippopotamus, and Annie will disappear forever. And number 7 then. If Annie's heart is pure, so if he passed this test with his heart, Ra, the sun god, will take him to Osiris, the god of the underworld, who will allow him to enter the afterlife. And finally, number 8, in the field of reeds, Annie is reunited with his ancestors, so his family, and is given a plot of land to look after. Here, there is no sadness, pain, or anger. His Shakti dolls will help him with his work. So that's what was on his scroll, which they found, his Book of the Dead, and it talks about how he got his journey to the afterlife, basically. And I think it's really interesting to find out what he had to go through to get to the afterlife and then what happened to him. So your task then today, you have a selection of 2, so just do one or the other. So I don't know why that's still there. There we go. Don't do both because that will take you ages, so just make sure you do one or the other. So the first task you can do is recreate Annie's journey through the underworld. So that's about the journey which we've just gone through, so this these steps and this. So you will get the storyboard, which is on the school website, and you will either there's 3 versions of it. You can pick which one you want to do. I don't mind. So there's one version where all the writing's there, so you'll just have to draw the pictures. If you want to do that, then that's fine. There's another version where some of the writing's there and some isn't, so you'll have to add more and draw the pictures as well. Or if you want a challenge, then you can print off the blank storyboard option, and you will write it all in yourself, Annie's journey to the Underworld, and draw the pictures as well. So if you have a printer, then that's great. If not, then just draw it yourself or just copy it out, whatever's best for you to do at home. So that's task 1. Remember to send in a picture of it once you've finished it. If you want to do Annie's journey through the Underworld, then you can go back through the video and use this to help you, because it tells you exactly what he did to get to the afterlife. And task 2 then, if you don't want to do Annie's journey, you can create your own journey through the Underworld to get to the afterlife. That should be journey through the afterlife, sorry. So you can use inspiration from Annie's journey to the Underlife to make your own. So you might have to think about what you might pass in the Underworld to get to the afterlife, and what might happen when you get to the afterlife. Which gods might you pass that you've learned about? What treasures are going to be in your tomb when you are mummified at the beginning of your story or journey through the afterlife? So it's all of those kinds of things. You can base it off Annie's journey to the afterlife, but just add your own details in. That's probably what I would suggest doing. But it's completely up to you. You don't have to do this. You can just do Annie's journey if you like. So the same concept, you'll draw a storyboard and you'll write about what happens actually at each part of the story. So you can do either task, I don't mind. You can print off the blank template on the website to do this one, or you can draw it yourself. Try and make it as exciting as possible, because Annie's journey is quite exciting. So if you base it on that, then hopefully it should be quite an exciting journey, because it's meant to be quite adventurous. And remember to send it in, because I love to see them and to read about your journeys through the afterlife. That's everything for today. Hope it was all okay. If you have any questions, then feel free to email me, and I hope you enjoy making your storyboard.